So, liebe Damen und Herren, we're talking about for the last session for the symposium about dance, history und archiving for the dance. We're talking about together von Christina Henninger und Canan Erek. What is Canan Erek? Canan Erek is a dancer choreographer at Kuratorin living in Berlin. She has been working as freelance artist for 25 Jahre now and has realized numerous projects in the field of dance. Since 2016, she has been the initiator and artist director of Publikum, International Dance Festival for Young Audience, which takes place annually in January in Berlin. From 2020, she will be the curator of the International Tanz Festival Heilbronn. Jetzt we talk together Christina Henninger. He is of the Media Library of Dance and Theater at the ETE Germany. She's coordinates the ETE Research Area Archive and Praxis, which focus on the theoretical and practical interweaving of the performing art in archival process, including question of international and transnational relations within the heritage discussion, issue of the digitalization and prevention, canonization and curation. Current projects include Archive on the Independent Performing Art, Concept Phase, TanzArchiv Berlin, DVG Project Digital Networking, Performing Art Media Library. So.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome back after the lunch break. Since 2 minutes ago, we still had the sun in here in Essen. Actually, we have great weather in comparison to the last 2 days. But we're sitting here on the Black Cube, and we wanted just to talk a bit about who's sitting with us here, so that you, the audience in the Zoom meeting, knows that we aren't alone. We are here with like 30, 40 people sitting with us in the room, and it's amazing to have a live audience with us. Aside of you, of course, and the digital audience, to speak to and to have these two audiences together. And also welcome to Canan.
Welcome, Christina.
Hello. We're doing this session together today, and maybe on the first glance, what have archive and audience to do together? Isn't that easy to ask and that easy to answer, I'd say. And we will see what will come out after this session. So I hope you stay enjoyed. Okay, archive. I'm talking about the archive. Thank you, David, for the introduction. And I hope you don't switch off now, because archive does sound a bit boring in the beginning, but if you just listen like a minute or 10 minutes, I think I need 10 minutes, you will see what it has to do with history telling, with storytelling, with empowerment and having the power. And I hope you get excited as much as I am about the subject. Let's see to that. Dimensions of a future dance archive. And I apologize also that I will read from the paper because I don't want to forget important facts. But I will read slowly. Nicola asked me for that. I will read very slowly, so hopefully that is okay. Also thanks to the translator in that case. During the course of the last 30 years, the archival turn has influenced various disciplines, such as anthropology, philosophy, cultural theory, as well as many forms of art. The archival turn can be defined as a network of concepts that stress the purpose and aim of the archive and their relation to political and institutional power. At the same time, redefining the options of the archival notion, allowing for more fluid, more pluralistic concepts that better reflect diversity of societies. So hopefully an optimistic start for this term. The concept of the archive as a form of gatekeeper to relevant knowledge in a society is an idea that derived from Western, European and American bureaucratic traditions. It has since then been questioned for excluding not only other structures of knowledge building, such as non-curated, non-written or non-tactile forms, but also for keeping out a large part of society, mainly non-white, non-male, those non-being in power. Starting from the currently ongoing conceptual and practical work for a new TanzArchiv in Berlin, I will point out how the concept development on the TanzArchiv interferes with these theoretical implications I now introduced, negotiating how a new TanzArchiv Berlin can be an archive for the whole scene, asking at the same time, who is this scene? Open to everyone, reflecting in new ways on the knowledge about dance and of dance makers and the knowledge produced in dance and movement. So the parameters of the archive group. In 2018, during an amazing participative process of Rundertisch Tanz Berlin, Roundtable Dance in Berlin, a one-year continuous discussion of more than 200 artists negotiated the work conditions in the dance sphere in Berlin. Questions surrounded funding structures, mediation strategies, questions of diversity and inclusion, with one of the topics also being the question of how to transfer knowledge of dance into the future. And what is this knowledge and all these extensions? Since October 2020, a group of 5 experts from the field of dance practice, dance theory, dance journalism, dance documentation, and dance archiving worked on turning the world upside down, not being the ones asking the gatekeepers of the archive how to enter the sacred halls of dance memory, or whether at all one is allowed to enter them, but rather they started rethinking from scratch what an archive for dance should look like, thinking from the point of who is represented and who is representing, what representation and participation might look like, and what forms of structures and cooperation might follow. In the following minutes, I will subsume the results of these concept makings, the research phase, and will try to turn them into 6 imperatives for action. So it's starting to go into this action plan phase that we will have in the end of this whole symposium today. These are the dimensions of the future dance archive. First, create new archives. By building new memories in relation to the past, we become the curators of our own lives, constantly producing new traces to rewrite our histories in relation to those of others. It is in the archive that our presence is captured and its traces are read relationally in time. It is again in the archive that history can be encountered as subjective memories, and that vice versa, subjective memories are shaped as collective histories. This was a side quote from Gabriela Giannacci, A Brief History of the Archive. First of all, we need to admit that archives have excluded and likely always will exclude individuals, collectives, society groups with their memories, their knowledges, their experiences. This happens no matter how hard you try, through to pragmatic archival processes, through to political decisions, and through to everything related to the archive as the system coming from a Western society, coming from a Western knowledge system. There is no way of entirely avoiding these processes within a single archive. The only way to approach this issue is by constantly building new archives and naming them as such, labeling, and try to find new ways of sorting, which may again exclude other facts or individuals. Try to include new groups, behaviors, and knowledges, and thus constantly create a tension between existing archives and not yet created archives. The constant reinvention of the archive, the processual archive, which then might eventually become long-lasting, seemingly everlasting, Being questioned again must be the aim to work against discriminatory processes. Second, speculate. The perfect archive doesn't exist. How is that we know how to create new archives in the best way then? The fact is we don't. What we have to do is to speculate, to negotiate, to try out, to experiment. In 2019, Het Nieuwe Instituut in Rotterdam created the speculative archive of design, trying to uncover the value of both acknowledged masterpieces and forgotten treasures. Questions were, what will we save for the future? What will be forgotten? Why will it be forgotten? Who will decide what will stay? And based on what criteria? Similarly to the memory of dance, the collective memory of design is scattered, often recreated, reused. Sometimes neatly organized in the aftermath, but more often extremely disorganized. Through the temporary nature of the project Speculative Archive of Design, Het Nieuwe Instituut had the opportunity to investigate many potential solutions for the Dutch design heritage, invite numerous actors in the field of design to be part of the project, institutional, individual, governmental partners, and thus to stress the question of safeguarding within the art heritage in general. And so, what we seem to need is a speculative dance archive. Knowledge within dance doesn't or does not only exist in texts. It is comprised in bodies, in memories, in gestures, in movements, in interpersonal relationships. What to collect in dance is a question that thus cannot be answered easily. The old lament that the archive shall work with the tangible remains and residues of the living art form of dance cannot be sufficient. We need to collect everything from the art of dance: memory, movement, and object. We cannot know what will be important to someone or everyone one day. We cannot decide how to not exclude someone or something. Every decision may lead to exclusion. We must try to go into new directions, find new dances, create new dances for a new archive. More is more. Third, enhance perspectives. How do we move from an archival universe dominated by one cultural paradigm to an archival multiverse? From a world constructed in terms of the one and the other, to a world of multiple ways of knowing and practicing, of multiple narratives coexisting in one space. This is a quote from Educating for the Archival Multiverse by Ali Boucher and Shannon Foucault, among other authors. The archival multiverse, a term introduced by a research team around the editors Anne Gilliland, Sue McCamish, and Andrew Law, and amongst them also Ali Boucher and Shannon Foucault, that I talked about, describes interdisciplinary, including multi-perspective archival concepts that also embrace incommensurable cultural expressions, understandings, and epistemologies. The knowledge and transmission methods of indigenous communities in the Americas and Australia and Oceania as an important starting point and source of the publications allow for an enhanced perspective on the notion of knowledge transfer, on the transmission of experiences, and the movement of thoughts. The idea of how knowledge is part of a society, a community, a state is hence to be re-questioned anew. The necessity to reinvent the archive, to include a various range of forms of knowledge, which also sometimes contradict each other, is a crucial task. New forms of recognition, of empowerment and visibility are possible this way. When professional academic forms of analysis stand side by side with community practical knowledge, with written records or bodily movement. And here I want to take again, a little thread to the yesterday presentation of Kudos Onikeko about the question of how knowledge structures also in the digital world can change powership relations. Actually, this was an important point that also fits to this point 3 in my dimensions and parameters. So all fits together in the end. Fourth, collaborate. In her TED talk, The Danger of a Single Story, Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie says, how stories are told, who tells them, when they are told, how many stories are told, are really dependent on power. The necessity of different perspectives and the necessity to recognize who I am when telling a story or archiving, that's my excess, is an important step. Another story, since 2012, representatives of the independent archives in Germany, the so-called archives of movement, though here political movement is meant, unfortunately not dance, meet regularly to discuss how to interconnect their work. Numerous smaller and bigger archives derived out of the upheavals in the 1960s in Germany, environmental initiatives, queer feminist movements, oppositions of the GDR, peace movements, which collected their active protest work, notes, flyers, posters, also memories. These groups exchange on archiving methods, legal implications, digitizations. The archives from below always existed in parallel to the established state and community archives. With massively lower budgets, if at all budget existed, the existence of similar archives that had similar questions helped them very pragmatically to arrange a form of knowledge transfer to keep their collecting processes alive up to today. Both these two examples point from very different perspectives on the question of representation and involvement. They present in a further interpretation the importance of collaboration within the archive. Knowledge on dance, quite similarly to the example of Adichie, is mostly not comprised in one person, the archivist, the person in power. Knowledge needs to be found in different groups, collectives, societies. It lies in between relational forms. The acceptance of different ways to approach knowledge in dance through forms of collaboration allows also to accept a decentral structure of working methods intertwining with each other. Further, collaboration around the knowledge of how to keep an archive creates the chance of sustainability of the archival work as done in the archives from below. Only if the exchange on archive structures is vividly active, it is possible to also keep smaller archival structures alive. Though funding, of course, will always be another very important issue. The concept of the TanzArchiv Berlin tries to act at an intermediary position of collaboration at the cross-section of archival work and artistic practice. During the last year, we tried to build up a network of archival accomplices, working at various projects within dance archival practice, researching from different practical and academic perspectives. The network will grow, that's what we hope, as an important part of the new TanzArchiv in Berlin, bringing in ever new perspectives on the question of how a dance archive should look like. Fifth, move your memory. Speaking of the network, in their ongoing project, Touching Margins, the dance artists and scholars Sasha Podjanikova and Nitsa Magaliot, part of our dance archive accomplices, work together with various artists and researchers who within their own artistic research projects concentrate on exploring the edges of narratives in dance history. This highly ambitious project starts from the point of view of the artist, letting the artistic research being the gravity point of finding new and relevant ways of archiving dance. Questions of overlooked artists and teachers, underrepresented dance heritage and non-Western dance traditions are in the focus of the participating artists' concepts. The core work method of the project, long duration and longevity of the research, plurality of researches, processual methods which allow to search and rethink, to explore and to dismiss, enable the participants to rediscover forgotten or underrepresented forms of dance characters and techniques, schools and ideas, by moving also their own expectations and knowledge about dance. Constantly, the artists question their own role within the research processes and their own perspectives, temporally, geographically, ideologically, in terms of presupposition. The necessity of undoing and redoing, of rethinking and recreating the archival work is a necessary step towards new forms of archive and knowledge transmission. To do this from the point of view of the dance artist seems like an obvious step within a dance archive, given that this should be an archive that centers all the time around this form of art. However, it is still uncommon to invite artists to be part of his or her indexing in the archive. And if at all existing artistic interventions to the archive are still a rather rare peculiarity, something nice to have in the end, to the everyday archive work. The urge to have the artist present in different stages of the archive is, however, badly needed and should be the undoubted base of every arts archive. Sixth, act and interact. This brings me to my last point. Archives are always highly subjective. This is what we already said in the beginning, so it didn't change until now. By recognizing this fact, it becomes easier to accept dynamic structures of the archive which might be questioned by anyone, which allows for participation. To understand archives not as keepers of goods, but as social and discursive spaces opens the way for diversified archives. These spaces allow to unlearn common knowledge, to try out, to participate. But what does participation in this case mean? To loosely translate Renate Höllworth, one of the authors of the publication Sich mit Sammlungen anlegen, which is a German play with words, combining the notion to create collections and to fight against collections. She says, participation means developing approaches that succeed in developing knowledge transversely to the hierarchies of common knowledge production. So it's important that participation is not something that is aside, coming to the archive and then going again, but really changing the knowledge system within the archive itself. The chance of transforming the archive through this further fifth dimension, the audience, with the first four being artists, activists, researchers, and archivists. As a social place puts archives in a new position, having the urge to have people in the public be part of their knowledge production. Participation in this case presumes the audience of the archive being in a position of not only passive, but also active involvement, between observing and interacting with the archive, between receiving, but also knowledge giving. It is a mandatory part of the archive's being in the world, its contemporaneity and its relevance. And with this sentiment, with opening up with the utopian idea of the archive and ending with the necessity of the audience, I would like to hand over to Canan, who will talk about this part. I also promised this in the beginning. Thank you.
I will serve some water for you first.
Thank you. I hope for that.
Yep.
Prost.
Genau. Yeah, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for having me here. Thank you for the bridge. I choose today to speak about the audience, as this topic is an important one for me in the role of a programmer and festival director. But also as an artist, I wish every time to reach as much as different people, of course, with the art served. So the question, how to achieve a dance, a diverse audience for dance, I will try to proceed along this question. Before I begin to talk about my consideration about the term diversity, I would like to point out that this term means much more than when we think about it at first. For this, I would like to invoke this from Wikipedia. Diversity, as seen in sociology and political studies, is the degree of differences in identifying features among the members of a purposefully defined group, such as any group, differences in racial or ethnic classifications, age, gender, religion, philosophy, physical abilities, socioeconomical background, sexual orientation, gender identity, intelligence, mental health, physical health, genetic attributes, personality, behavior, or attractiveness. Probably this list will get longer in the future. Furthermore, each of us is diverse within ourselves, as one can combine different characteristics which is defined by diversity. So if we want to reach a diverse audience for dance, we mean basically to reach everybody. Do we want to achieve a diverse audience for dance? If yes, why? Me personally, because I believe that dance can bring everybody together as spectators as well as dancing bodies without excluding anybody. In dance, we can treat the differences with a creative approach and connect people. I rather like to stress the similarities than the differentiations between humans. In the sense, we all have a body, no matter how it looks like. And we can engage through dance into the life. In this context, dance can resonate really well with diversity and inclusion. Today, I want to share some of my thoughts as a curator and festival director about the audience and its diversity within the dance scene. I brought some questions, more than answers, I guess. The first one is, how diverse is the dance audience already? I can only try to answer this personally, of course, and mainly in the context of Berlin, where I live in. To begin with an answer, I've tried first to segment the audience into young, kids and youth, and the others. This is, of course, a very rough division when it comes to diversity, as it points out only the age. Let's stick to this and examine the difference due to the diversity of an audience. On one hand, it's easier, for example, to launch a dance festival, for example, for young audience, as this defines already a target group. As an example, I would like to talk about my experiences within Purple, which is an international dance festival for young audience in Berlin. And as an artistic director and curator of this festival, my main interest was and is still to present different aesthetics, approach of contemporary dance, as well as to encourage young people to empathize, to participate, and to reflect on what they see. Our festival program is most of all, from the very first, dedicated to school classes to come. Therefore, we offer morning shows and provide mediation of dance for the age group between 6 and 18. And to reach this group, we need to get in contact with schools and win the teachers over to come to the festival with their pupils. That's how it normally functions. And if your aim is not only to reach young audience, but to achieve a diverse gathering in a dance, within a dance performance, then you begin to ask yourself, which schools are coming to us and which not? Within a school class, you probably meet a certain diversity. However, this issue can be broadly defined by the school form and the district where the school is located. In all major cities in Germany, it can be observed that schools have different pupils depending on their district. As we aimed from the very first to achieve a diverse audience for our festival, we looked up for venues in different districts of Berlin and we began to cooperate with them. By doing so, we wanted to simplify the access to the festival. Also for the teachers, of course, that they are not, traveling around so much, to make them more comfortable. Additionally, we began to offer dance performances in schools and offer this especially for the suburb districts of Berlin. With this engagement, we claim to reach a very diverse audience within this target group, and we think over every year what we could do better. I personally believe that staging dance for a young audience and hosting school classes is a very promising act to achieve a diverse audience for dance. Let's have a look to the other group, which comes by its own wish to a dance performance which is not organized in a group like a school class. Those are individuals, young and adults mixed. How to create access for everybody who may enjoy watching dance? There is an increasing amount of audience for contemporary dance. That's what I observed over the last 20 years, and it's fantastic. My observation also shows that the consistency of the audience varies from venue to venue. In a bigger established institution, you meet mostly mid-aged people belonging to a certain socio-economical background, and in alternative venues, mostly young, internationally mixed public. Especially in Berlin, there is a growing dance community. More and more people begin to dance, watch dance, and there's several dance performances every night where you can choose where to go. When it comes to the audience, there is always the question to be answered by the dance institution who hosts the event. Whom do we want to invite into our venues? How to reach them? Are we really aiming for a diverse audience, or is it more important to serve a certain segment within the dance art scene to develop a profile and recognition for the venue? Is there a way where both intentions, reaching a diverse audience and establishing profile, are possible at the same time? To develop a reliable concept of diversity, I get a note there. To develop a reliable concept of diversity, an institution needs to look up different spheres of activities and consider at least its program, its staff members, and the audience. In all those three categories, there is potential for growing target values in the name of diversity. Those values can only grow when everybody in cultural and artistic field encounter each other with respect. Can diversity be achieved by law? Can we establish a self-concept of diversity which is appreciated by everybody? In my opinion, all state-funded cultural institutions should take diversity into consideration and develop a concept. But creating a concept is just the beginning. This doesn't change much as long as this concept does not put in action. Let's stay by the example of the management of an institution, from where I ask myself from where the need can come from for more diversity if it's not demanded by regulations. One option could be when they realize that their survival is depending on a basic change. If the quantity of sold tickets are shrinking, then either they attract more audience or they become redundant. So then they can try to change their program to attract a majority, or they rethink the whole concept due to the society where this house exists. The second thought would bring up different perspectives and new ideas. It is more than changing the program. They would then also enable different artistic perspectives to be heard, and this would be the promise to achieve a new and diverse public. Coming back to Berlin as an example, there we have several venues, studios, exceptional places with interesting concepts and related artists. That's also why Berlin attracts dance makers since a long time. And if those places would work on different perspectives of dance with an awareness of diversity, provide accesses without discrimination, support artists, develop their content-related profile, this would be the richness of the scene even more than today. This is, of course, only possible when those places have a funding. And this is a direct link to the cultural politics. In this context, I would like to stress that the distribution of the funding money has an enormous impact on the development of diversity. My convincement is that we should work on accessibility for anyone who is interested in dance as a dancer, dance maker, or spectator. Okay. So, the last sentence, you will hear better. So if we can develop those variety of accesses, only then we will be able to have a real, diverse community within the dance scene. Thank you for listening. That's it.
We're trying to move to keep in the task that we get over the monitor over there. Thank you.
Because of, yeah, sound system.
Maybe can you name some best practice examples of what you thought of? Because you talked so much about institutions, which is an important part, arts institutions, and how to diversify. And you had this idea of how it is related to be more diversified, but on the other hand also have a profile, and how this comes together, maybe expanding both of them. And maybe you do have an example?
I mean, in my opinion, if you're living in a big city and you have these little venues, of course they need to specify their program on something in order to attract the audience. But in total, if you would have, let's say, 20 venues and everybody has a main topic and they diverse each other in the whole, they don't do the same or more or less the same, then we will have a diverse appearance or scene as such in total. So I don't think that one institution can cover, as we know, diversity is a huge term. And the bigger institutions, I guess, there should be the awareness. If they just want to change their program, then it would end up like what we had yesterday with this WhatsApp dialogue, that they bring different things in, like accessoires, you know, changing the deco, and then perhaps expecting that the audience will change by this. But this is not happening. I mean, you may all know and some places they have their, let's say, fan club audience. This is also a kind of developing a profile and attracting people on this. I think that's not a bad way to do it, but you need to, or it would be nice if there is a broader aspect, if they would also exchange maybe more with each other in order to, stress the missing links in the diversity. And it's about dance styles, but not only. I think the community work is important. Like I said, old, young, very old also, as we are aiming to. I mean, also, when I hear the classical institutions, of course, sometimes they play this role of we are the guardian of the tradition. So that's kind of the reason to exist and to have the money. I think in the name of the diversity, we need to accept also the tradition, but to find another distribution of the financial source and an acceptance by the politics. So it's still a long way to go, but I think we are on the right track, as I'm an optimist.
In the end, somehow you have to understand the scene as a network of institutions. That's what I take out.
Yeah.
So that's also something that should be reflected on the funding system. To say, okay, if institutions work together, there should be and not just two, but many of them, there should be some other kind of funding also if they relate to each other and relate to the super local situation where they are.
Yeah, and the funding system should have also an overall view that they realize, oh, this had been, done by 5 venues, so a 6th one we don't need, and the 6th one comes with another idea, with another topic, so that's what we need. Perhaps they need also more knowledge about the scene, but it's also, I think, our duty to bring this knowledge up and to demand for this communication.